Welcome into another episode of Hog Roundup with Jacob Morris. We are talking all things Arkansas football today. Ty Richardson joins the show to give some storylines that we're looking at in the 2025 season. And then we wrap things up just taking it college football wide, sport wide. What are some storylines we've got our eye on for the upcoming season? It should be a fascinating one. Lots of different teams at the top, looking like a little bit more parity this year than years past. It's going to be an exciting one. That's going to do it for pretty much this entire episode of Hog Roundup. Enjoy. All right, joining the Hog Roundup now, as always, ESPN Arkansas's Ty Richardson. You know him well. Ty, last week we spent kind of just about 25 minutes eulogizing the college baseball season. It was a tough way for the Razorbacks to go out, obviously. We got to turn the page and begin talking about football. It's amazing. I know everybody always says this, how it sneaks up on you or whatever it might be, but Monday, June 30th, and we are 2 months away from college football season beginning. Well, I guess Arkansas season beginning, even closer for the rest of the season. So what we're going to do is just super simple. You and I are going to, for the next, 12, 13 minutes, we're going to bounce off each other. Just some Arkansas storylines we're looking forward to seeing this year, or got question marks about, whatever it might be. And we're just going to kind of bounce through what we're looking forward to seeing this season and whatever it might be, and kind of set the table for what's going to be an interesting Arkansas season, to say the least. I'll go first, Ty, and I think it's the elephant in the room, at least for me, in terms of what we're going to see from this football team, and it is what on earth Talon Green and his development is going to look like this year. And I think that's where it starts and finishes for Arkansas this season. I mean, it's not a hot take to say, you live and die by your quarterback, but with Talon last year, we saw the highs, we saw the lows. Each of them were really high and really low. He has the ability to make plays. I don't know why this play always pops in my head, Ty. I think back to it against Oklahoma State. I don't know if you remember this. The throw he made to Tyrone Broden in the corner of the end zone that Broden ultimately dropped, where he
Yeah.
escaped what felt like 17 different Oklahoma State defenders, and then fading across his body off one foot, put a ball in about a 3-foot basket right there, right? He makes those types of plays. If you build on that and you limit the mistakes, which is easier said than done, you could have a pretty darn impressive product on your hand, especially in an SEC that has a lot of question marks quarterback wise. That's where it starts and finishes for me.
Yeah, we had a chance to talk with Mr. Archie Manning this
Yeah.
last week. Obviously, Taylor was at the Manning Passage Academy in Thibodaux, Louisiana, and he talked about some elements that he liked about Taylor and the position overall being cerebral. Of course, his sons Eli and Peyton found success, as did Archie, in not just the college ranks but the National Football League as well. I think for Talon Green, who led Power 5 in fumbles lost last season, he's got to be a better decision maker in the pocket. I felt like at times, not that he had a good offensive line because he didn't last year, but at times I felt like he kind of wandered into sacks, wandered into forced fumbles, and he's got to be better just pocket awareness wise. And I'm not going to get in the weeds and knowing, like, did he call the right check? Did he call the right blocking scheme? Did Fernando Carmona block the right guy? Because I don't know the plays. Two, I don't know the audibles. Three, and again, that gets into it. But hopefully that development you're talking about, he's better under Bobby Petrino, which, as we've heard from Tyler Wilson, the late Ryan Mallett, Casey Dick, and others, it's not exactly the easiest offense to learn, especially with just one offseason under your belt. But now he's got two heading into this year.
Yeah, people always talk about the jump because of that. Petrino he was pretty adamant about the fact that it's the way it goes in year two when you just begin to understand more. And like, it's not something that's particularly new with Talon. We saw that, coming over from Boise. It was the first thing that popped out. If you just turned on the tape, turned on the highlight reel, the first thing you saw was a 94-yard run. So this is
Mm-hmm.
athleticism that 99% of quarterbacks in college football don't have, but it's the turnovers that snuck up time and time again, and turnovers in key spots as well. It goes without saying, but I think that's where it starts and finishes with Arkansas. Give me one. What do you got? Storyline for me that you're watching coming up this season.
I know we've talked about the wide receiver group and
Yes.
just the amount of pass catchers that you've won and lost, but defense doesn't always get enough credit for the goods and bads. I think special team wise, Devin Bale is going to be an all SEC type punter. We saw that last season. He was top 10 in punting average, and he could even be an All American depending on how Arkansas seasons goes because he really does have a great leg. I think for me, before I jump to defense, it's like what is the kicking game
Yeah.
look like? There were games last season where Arkansas frankly lost because of special teams. How many times have we said that in the Sam Pittman area where they've had an issue blocking or just field goals outside of Cam Little? You haven't had that consistent place kicker, and I think that's always something, especially with a team like Arkansas that doesn't have much room for error. You've got to have a guy that you feel to rely upon in the kicking game. You didn't have it last season. I know there's a few guys competing for the job this year, but and then defensively, Xavier Sori, Cam Ball, but who are some other playmakers on that group that are going to step up? There's a lot of guys that they're heading into this season taking larger roles than they've been typically accustomed to all here at Arkansas. I want to see which defensive star emerges outside of those two.
I think that's a great point, just because you have guys returning in terms of Cam Ball and Xavier Sori that
Hmm.
that are going to be looked upon to provide lots of different production. It also is just the fact that you lose a lot of different guys, difference makers. Obviously, Landon Jackson is there, but just due to the transfer portal, you lose guys in the secondary as well. And I think it's kind of a perfect segue to where I wanted to go next in terms of if you're looking at defense and you're looking at question marks. It's clear that from the beginning, the priority in the transfer portal was addressing secondary depth. You lose the Metcalfs, you lose Jalen Braxton, you lose guys on the defensive line, but in the secondary, it was like, man, there's not a lot coming back here that you can turn to. So Arkansas hit it hard in both the winter and the spring window, bringing in a lot of different guys, and that's going to be it. It just is that's going to be a question mark for this team. I think you
Hmm.
feel really good about a veteran group of linebackers, even if they're not super deep. If they stay healthy and you're led by Sori there, it's going to be a productive bunch. But what do you get from kind of a hodgepodge of different secondary acquisitions? And then you're also turning to a guy like, hey, we need Selman Bridges, who was really highly regarded as a freshman, didn't get a lot of action, but we think he can be something special. You're asking a lot of guys that Arkansas fans really haven't seen play in a Razorback uniform.
Yeah, I think when you look at that position across college football, do you have that one cover corner that could
Mhm.
potentially play at the next level? And they didn't have it last year. They did have it 2 years prior in Dwight Newton McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Still, that team went 4-8, so it's not like that's the only piece that helps a good football team. You alluded to good guys there. I'm curious about, is it now? Help me on this. Is it Wooden or Wooden, the kid from Auburn, the transfer
Wooden.
that
Wooden. Caleb
Wood
Wooden. Yeah.
Wooden? Yeah, he's the one that kind of sticks out to me as a guy that's been around the SEC for a while. It's got connection to T. Will, so that is the guy that I've kind of been reading more about him. I know there's been a few pieces on him in the offseason, just kind of the build up to this upcoming one. He's kind of the main character that I just wonder is like, man, if you get something from him, maybe that it pushes out to the rest of the guys that you'll see in the back end for this football team this fall.
It's a bit of a sidebar, but he's also just a kind of a fantastic example of where we're at in college football 2025 from the standpoint that, TJ Metcalf, he had an up and down season, but he really flashed. And both him and Tevis end up transferring to Michigan, a loss for Arkansas. But Caleb comes over from Auburn, and he talked about a massive role in him making the decision to transfer to Arkansas was he knew he would fit in the same position that TJ played. And TJ, if you remember, just had that monster game at Auburn where
Hmm.
he had a pick, a forced fumble, he had a bunch of tackles as well. And Caleb was honest about that. He said, I saw that up close and said, hey, I think I can play that role. I saw how productive it was, and that can help me get to the next level. I think that's kind of a nice little example of where we're at in terms of college football.
And you bring up the TJ going to Ann Arbor. I know that one hurt, like a mini offseason transfer.
Yeah.
It's not like you liked any of them, but I just remember being like, I was so happy. I mean,
Hmm.
Pinson, Alabama, if I remember that right, him and both Tevis, his little brother. I was so excited for those two, and particularly him, because I'm like, you saw growth. This is a kid under recruited, didn't get a good chance to go to Alabama or Auburn, and showed out in front of
Hmm.
the Tigers. And I'm thinking, man, his ceiling is going to be through the roof here. And then, of course, he's going up to the Big Ten, which hurts. So
Yeah.
anytime you have a situation, Desmond James, another example, like you kid in the Liberty Bowl. Has that touchdown and then is now I couldn't even tell you where he's at. That's the other thing. It's not
Yeah.
only like it's one thing to it's easy to know where the Metcalf brothers are at because it's
Yeah.
Michigan blue blood. You can remember it off the top, but there's a lot of kids. I'm going to be honest that like someone on their second and
Hmm.
third school that's hard to just keep track of from where they're Fayetteville to where they are now, Jacob.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Also, I mean, we don't need to belabor the point, but something that makes the Metcalf them transferring so frustrating is, first of all, it's a great family. We had a chance to spend a lot of time with them. Obviously, the NFL connections that they do as well, but
Mhm.
that's a situation where you kind of hit the nail on the head. Both of those kids really under recruited in a hotbed where Alabama and Auburn should be front row seats for both of these guys. And so Arkansas, in theory, right, does it exactly right. Pinpoints guys that are under recruited, grabs them, develops them, gives them the opportunity to play, and then they leave you for a team that won a national championship 2 years ago. And that, I think, is, I mean, we don't need to turn this into a where college football is at conversation debate, but I think that's a perfect example of what is so frustrating for fans, because Arkansas does everything right in that standpoint. TJ gets on the field early. Tevis is playing on special teams, and then you lose those guys to a blue blood. That's difficult, but regardless, it's something Arkansas is going to have to deal with. We'll talk more storylines, but first, a quick break. Back here on the Hog Roundup, Ty Richardson and Jacob Morris with you, continuing to just kind of mosey through some storylines we're looking forward to for the Arkansas football season. Give me another one you're looking at, Ty. Give me something you got your eye on in terms of, offense, defense, or just anything in general.
I think it's how Arkansas handles the home games this fall. They got the Tennessee win last year. They had a great home schedule in 2021, which they capitalized on. You think about A&M, and so it's kind of a contrast of a few different things. You've got Alabama A&M. You're going to clobber them that game one. If you want to count Little Rock as a home game, whatever. A-State, week 2. I know you were talking about Mike Irwin about that, and like years ago in any other sport, that's going to be a game that A-State wants all of it against you in that week 2 matchup. But when you think about home games against the likes of Notre Dame, A&M,
Mm-hmm.
Auburn, Mississippi State, Missouri, it's like last couple of years you haven't necessarily been as strong at home as you'd like to be if you're Sam Pittman. So can you pick off? Do I expect them to defeat the national runner-up? No, but can you beat A&M for the first time since 2021? Can you beat Missouri for the first time since 2021? You beat Auburn on the road last year. You beat State on the road last year. I don't think either of those teams are going to be that great. So those are, I'm not going to call them built-in wins because it's never
Yeah.
it's never like that in the Southeastern Conference, but there are some winnable games at home this fall. And I think for Arkansas, with the road schedule that's daunting with trips to Knoxville and Baton Rouge and Oxford and Austin, Texas, like I don't know if there's a single win in there. I hope there is.
Yeah.
I personally think they're going to beat the Longhorns at the end of November, but a lot of other people don't feel that way. So I think it's how they handle the home games, especially for a fan base that feels like at times they haven't been as productive at home versus on the road, which is absurd. You think it's the opposite, like
Mm-hmm.
any other college, but hasn't necessarily been the last few years.
Did you just try to skim over a prediction of a win against Texas in Austin?
Oh, have I not told you that? Yeah,
No.
that game is sandwiched, Jacob. That game is sandwiched in between Texas playing Georgia the week before and A&M the weekend after. I
Okay.
wholeheartedly believe that Arkansas is going to win that game, not because of talent, not because of matchups, but I think Texas is going to overlook them.
I love it.
That's the only element that I'm leading me to be in Arkansas again. Even last year's 20-10.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That game is. I'm excited to see what CJ Brown does this year. That game's,
Mm-hmm.
I think, a different football game if CJ doesn't fumble that screen pass.
Yep.
True freshman, tough situation. Hopefully he bounces back. But yeah, that's an early June 30th preseason prediction for this football teams. They go to Austin and beat the Horns.
I love it. I look forward to after November 22nd, clipping this, coming back, and we're going to give you all the love in the world. That is awesome.
Or get blasted. They lose.
No.
By
Well, we just won't. It's the type of situation where it's like we'll give you all the credit and none of the blame. Like we won't talk about
Perfect.
it if they lose to Texas, right? We'll bring that back up if they win. I'll expand on what you talked about. We're kind of in sync because I was going to talk about the flip side of that, of the road schedule, right? Just in terms of you hit it as well. It has been so odd the way this team has performed on the road and performed at home. And it has been a topic of conversation because, quite frankly, it's just been borderline inexplicable the way this team has performed, even going back to that 4-8 year where they were on the road against like the Heisman Trophy winner. And
you want me to walk through
for
each
it.
loss? All right. So in the first game, road game of the season, Jaden Daniels throws a pick to Nudie in that first half. Hold him down for probably 3/4 of that first half. Then he starts cooking, and Arkansas unfortunately stood no chance.
A
34 to
game-winning field
31.
goal, though.
Yep,
Like, you
30.
say they stood no
Mhm.
chance, but, like, game-winning field goal. Like,
And
yeah,
and
keep
I
going.
need to rephrase defensively.
Yeah.
Offensively, they still got some things going in that game. You move on to Ole Miss. Jackson Dart has a terrible game. I think threw 2 interceptions. There was a fourth down stop. He
Yeah.
looked bad. 27 to 20. KJ throws 2 picks, and it was actually KJ, not Dart that threw the interceptions. KJ again looked bad in that game. Offensively, they didn't get it going. Alabama, there is a Rashad Dominion zone read play that he trips on the grass that he would have gone to the house. So I
Yes.
remember that game. And there's also like a 3rd and 10 where Jalen Milroe gets hit as he throws the ball. It is between the safety and above the linebacker, and somehow, some way they complete it. And then the Florida game, which Arkansas's never won in
Mhm.
Gainesville. That was a terrible Florida team,
Yeah.
and yet they found a way to win. And that game was electric. Let me tell you, I will say this: it was louder at 12 o'clock in the afternoon at the Swamp than it was a night game at Death Valley.
Wow.
I was surprised. I was shocked, to be honest. But yes, trust me, I remember that year well, how Arkansas came up so close in 3 of the 4 road games against SEC competition.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what's so odd. So you date that back to 2 years. Like, well, we don't need to mince words. That was not a good football team. That 4-8 team. I mean, that
Mm-mm.
team. I always go back to it. Now we're just getting a 2023 segue in here. That Mississippi State loss might be the worst game of American football I've ever had. The whatever the opposite of privilege is of being in the building for. That it was 7-3 or whatever.
Ugh.
Like, it was horrific, right? But then that team goes on the road and does what they do. Like, this has been just a theme for this team the last couple of years. And the reason I bring it up is because of what you said. When you start laying out the road schedule for this team, it is just ridiculous. You have Ole Miss. I mean, you go to Memphis, who has routinely been one of the best group of 5 teams in the entire country over the last decade, and you go to them, and that is sandwiched in between going to Ole Miss and hosting Notre Dame. So if you want to use the Texas trap game example, how about a trap game for Arkansas having to go on the road at Memphis? Then you said it at Tennessee, at LSU, at Texas. And so the reason that I'm bringing that up to tie it in with you is you better get wins at home. Those
Oh yeah.
games where you could border, I mean, I don't even know if you can call Missouri a coin flip at this point. You can't, given the history of it, right? But that's a game you need to win. You have to win Mississippi State, given what that program was a year ago. Auburn, we don't know what they're going to look like. They get Jackson Arnold in from Oklahoma, but you better be competitive and you better win that game. And the same thing with A&M. So that's why this schedule, it is so beyond brutal. But those breaks, you're going to have to take them wherever they pop up, and it's going to have to be a team that performs in some capacity at home. Otherwise, they're not going to have a prayer to put together a competitive record this year. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll give a couple general college football storylines, some SEC takes as well. One more quick break, and then we'll be back. Back here on the Hog Roundup, wrapping up shop. Ty Richardson and Jacob Morris. Ty, quickly before we go, give me because I just want an excuse to talk about the sport of college football. Give me one landscape-wide storyline you're looking at this year, general or specific.
It's the SEC. Is the
Okay.
SEC going to go 3 straight years without winning a
Yeah.
national
A
championship?
drought. A drought.
Yeah, and I think so.
Okay.
Because when I talked about it on our show this morning, it was my hot take. When you look at the team, and I'm not going to say that I'm Phil Steele or any of the other, but there's no dominant team. Like when you just go, who's the best team in the SEC?
For me,
Yeah,
I'm going to take Alabama, but that's we're getting there.
But-
Continue.
yeah. But to your point,
Parity.
so you're Max Simpson, Ryan Williams. I mean that, and they're going to be better,
Ty
I think,
Simpson,
on
yeah.
defense too. I'm sorry, not Mac. I'm used to saying Mac Jones, Ty Simpson. So I think when you look up and down, I say up and down, first 5 or 6 teams traditionally on the top,
Yeah.
there are elements to that team. You're like, I don't know. And most of it's quarterback. Like you're going from Milroe the last 2 years to Ty Simpson. Then you look at other teams. Georgia loses Carson Beck. LSU still hasn't gotten to that alpha mode under Brian Kelly. You look at Ole Miss. Can they finally take that next step and win the SEC? Unlike their storied history. So there's so many things you battle back and forth, and I just don't see a dominant team. When you don't have a dominant team, while it may create parity and you may get another team in the league, in the college football playoff outside of the 3 you got last year, that to me lends to a possibility, and not necessarily a probability of the team not winning the national championship.
Hmm.
I think the Southeastern Conference is in a situation where there are questions about this league that there haven't been in a while, just because you haven't won it two straight. So will that added pressure help get a team over the top, or will it be too much where we see a third straight year without a championship? Kate Klubnik's back at Clemson. You could look at the Big Ten. You could throw a dart at Michigan and Ohio State each year and say they have a chance. Maybe Penn State. Marcus Freeman's one of the best young coaches in college football, and Notre Dame's coming in, and they also play. Who's the other SEC team they play? Jacob,
They got A&M at home. They opened with
A&M at home
Miami
in
as
South
well. Yeah.
Bend. Yeah, so they've got a front loaded schedule, which could help them when it comes to the college football playoffs. So I think there's a very, I say a very good chance. I think there's a chance that the SEC has 3 straight years without a national championship, which is just absurd and unheard of, considering all the domination since 2006.
It's a drought. It's all over for the SEC.
Over.
The reason that I'm smiling, Ty, is because you and I just continue to be in sync here. My kind of just storyline I'm watching, looking across college football. I'm going to take what you said and I'm going to expand it out. It's going to be that there's so many unknowns with all of these teams. And what does it start with? It's that I can't remember a year in the past decade, whatever you want to go back to, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody find it, where this many teams favored in terms of, national championship odds, expectations, have question marks and new faces at quarterback. And so you laid out the SEC ones. When you look at Texas, we know Arch, we haven't seen him in a starting role. Georgia, it's now going to be Gunnar Stockton's team. Carson Beck is gone. You laid it out. Alabama brings in Ty Simpson. Really only Nussmeier is the only returner in terms of SEC teams that have a hope of, or not a hope, that are high up there in the odds. But it's not just the SEC teams, and that's why I think it's so interesting. Ohio State is like a narrow, favorite to repeat as a national champion, and Will Howard is gone. It's going to be a new quarterback in Columbus. You go down the list. Penn State brings back Drew Aller. But Oregon, it's Dante Moore. And so all of these different teams that are high up there and have high expectations are going to be breaking in new quarterbacks and are going to be in situations with unfamiliar signal callers. And that, to me, it maybe a team rises up and says, oh, this is an elite team that's going to be, better than all. But to me, it lends itself for a situation where it also could be a chaotic year where you have no idea come college football playoff time who is the favorite. And what a year that felt a lot like last year until Ohio State won on its death run, where you really have no idea going into the college football playoff of who's going to win the whole thing.
I think you might typically go to the quarterback position, but as others have instructed me and frankly led me in the right direction, it's not always about that. So LSU, I think, lost 4 of their 5 top offensive linemen, if I remember that correctly. So while Nussmeier may indeed be the best quarterback in the SEC, not named Lenore Sellers, that is something you always have to keep account of.
Yeah, and for LSU, it's going to be the transfer class that they are going to lean on.
Yep.
It is what LSU poured a lot of money into, and quite frankly, if you want to go a college football storyline, a lot of that money freed up once Bryce Underwood decommitted from Kelly and LSU and flipped himself to Michigan for a few couple million, right? So that's going to be what LSU leans on. It starts with Nussmeier, but it's going to be an interesting college football season. We will continue to discuss it as we get closer, just about 2 months away. But that's all the time we have on this week's Hog Roundup. That is Ty Richardson. I am Jacob Morris. We'll be back to talk to you next week.